Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the County Council session for April 7th. I can't believe it's April already. I hope everybody had a great spring break. We are going to start with a couple of proclamations. The first one is a proclamation recognizing Fair Housing Month by the County Council's Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. Let's go, guys. If you're here for that proclamation, please move forward.
Good morning. We are here as the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee to celebrate Fair Housing Month here in Montgomery County. It is a good morning to celebrate Montgomery County's historic and ongoing leadership on fair housing, starting in 1967 when Montgomery County planted our flag to make sure that everybody had access to fair housing in our community, and we continue to live our values out loud of being an inclusive and a welcoming community, even when it is challenging, especially when it is challenging. And unfortunately, some of the challenges that we have historically faced continue to be a challenge today. We have a number of guests with us. We're going to ask them to introduce themselves and also ask the guests who are here for Fair Housing Month to come down. If your name rhymes with me, last name in particular, come on down. We'll have you introduce yourself last, Jeff.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is James Bridgers, and I am the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services.
Rob Goldman, President of MHP, celebrating 25 years in a day or two, so.
Good morning, Melissa McKenna, the Executive Director of the Affordable Housing Conference of Montgomery County, celebrating 35 years.
Ralph Bennett, Co-Chair of the Affordable Housing Conference.
John Mendez, Executive Director at Bethesda Cares.
Jim Stowe, Director of the Office of Human Rights.
Good morning, everyone. Kayreen Brown, Senior Executive Vice President with the Housing Opportunities Commission for 28 years.
Good morning. Max Glickman, Director of Real Estate Development, Enterprise Community Development.
Good morning. Scott Bruton, Director of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs.
Christine Hong, Chief of Services to End and Prevent Homelessness with the Department of Health and Human Services.
Russell Brazil, the President of the Greater Capital Area Association of Realtors.
Good morning. I'm Mary Kohler with the Montgomery Housing Alliance.
Good morning. Jeff D. rhymes with me. CEO of Habitat for Humanity Metro Maryland.
Just on time. Is everybody? Okay. Great. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. I just wanted everybody to introduce themselves to ensure we reiterate how fair housing happens. It doesn't happen by government alone. It doesn't happen by community members alone. It happens because of government, nonprofit, and private sector coordination and partnership. We have an interagency commission that works on these issues. We have county government departments that work on these issues. We have nonprofit partners who dedicate themselves to these issues, and we have private sector partners who are committed to fulfilling inclusive communities. And that is ultimately how Section 27 of the Code, which began in 1967 when we really became a champion of these issues in Montgomery County and put those standards into law, that's how we live them every day. And that's how we ensure access to every member of our community. And when we talk about the basic necessities, food, shelter, and clothing, shelter is second. And we're committed to ensuring that everybody has access to it here in Montgomery County. I'm proud to serve with the members of the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee who have continued on Montgomery County's historic legacy. Let me turn it over to them, starting with the Council President.
Thank you, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the chair of the PHP committee for organizing this important event that is actually a reminder of the things that we do in Montgomery County to evolve and really ensure that our families have a stable homes. And at the end of the day, that's what we want. We don't want people just to work here. We want people to find a home here and enjoy it and having a healthy house too. With that, I'm so proud to live in Montgomery County, a place that continues to evolve with each one of us to ensure that we have policies that really reflect our values. So with that, thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Councilmember Will Jawando.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you to my colleagues on PHP and to everyone who's here today and to celebrate and commemorate and also commit to the work ahead. Councilman Friesen mentioned how we were on the front end of fair housing here in Montgomery County. I was at the Forest Glen commemoration site recently, which is the site where in 1966 you had community members march 66 miles and kind of clog up the Beltway because black residents in particular and others were being restricted from buying in that Forest Glen neighborhood of Silver Spring. A year later, we had our first fair housing law. And has led us on this path of progress. But we know we have significant challenges. We are segregated today, not dissimilar to how we were segregated in that time legally, de facto versus de jure. We know that appraisals are not done properly and fairly, depending on what community you live in. We know we have challenges in home ownership, particularly in the black community and Latino community. So we have a lot to do, but I'm proud that this county has always stood on the forefront of trying to push forward. And you're going to hear from our great director of human rights, Jim Stowe, and the work that they do. But it does take everyone to make sure that the more subtle ways that housing is still not fair, and housing is a human right. Everyone deserves to be housed safely, affordably in Montgomery County. And so we still have a ways to go, but this is a great reminder of what we've done and that we're still committed to that outcome. So with that, I'll turn it back over to my chair.
Appreciate it. I was thinking about the residences at Forest Glen, and we have MHP here, and that was a public-private partnership and nonprofit partnership as well, with MHP working together through the master planning process. It was one of the first master plans that we got to work on together, and we were able to be there at the ribbon cutting and actually see the benefits of the work that we do to provide access to our community members in one of the most important places in the county, but also a historic place where 58 years ago this started, which we're commemorating on Saturday, April 11th, which is the 58th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act. With that, we have the person who is responsible for carrying out much of this work on behalf of county government, and that is Director Jim Stowe. In other contexts, I might refer to him as Reverend Jim Stowe, but here I'll call him Director Jim Stowe.
Thank you so much to our council members and council president and members of council. Good morning. Council Friesen, it was, we had a great, there was a big backyard, and we were excited about it. And in that backyard was a play set already erected, and I could see my 3- and 5-year-old playing out there and having a grand time. And so we go into the house, and the house is exactly what we were looking for. It was a ranch. It was one of those rambling ranches and so forth, and so it had plenty of room to run around in, and so we were so excited about that. And of course, the kitchen was just exactly like my wife would have liked it, and so it was going to be great. We got even to the point, Councilman Friesen, that we had measured the windows for the new shades. And that was going to be a great thing. And I was just so excited. We were in a great school district and moving to a new community. It was all great. And so we got a closing date. And so we were there getting ready then to move everything forward from our old house to the new house. And so the furniture was literally on the way. The furniture was literally on the way. Got a call that our full price offer has somehow or another been rescinded. So what in the world could that have been about? Full price offer, financing already in place, all the things you need to make this sale go through. We had a closing date set. They rescinded the offer. I said, let me just think about all this. I'm in civil rights. I'm in human rights. I'm kind of think all this through. And so when I did that, I looked at this idea. Maybe it was when the kids came up to see the house that they were outside playing, and we were going to be the only black family in the community. And there were neighbors outside looking at us and sort of staring at us at that particular point in time. Maybe that was what the reason was. I had gone to a new city to begin my career as a civil rights professional. And the very first case I had for fair housing was my own case. It's personal. It is real. And I'm remembering it as though it was yesterday. My friends, that's what happens with discrimination. That's what it feels like. That's what it looks like. And I'm so glad that back in July 20th, actually, of 1968, the first law was repealed because folks thought it was just too aggressive, too progressive in 1967 because we would have been first. We would have been first in the nation to have an open housing law, that's what it was called back in those days. But July 20th, and it was women, by the way, women came back and really began to really push forward with county council at that point in time. And July 20th of 1968, we began the open housing law here in Montgomery County. Since that time, we made a number of improvements, and thanks to Councilmember Glass and Councilmember Sales, we end up having the Fair Housing Justice Act that allows us to look at issues relative to those who have criminal records and those who are homeless, trying to get a second chance to get right back into some sense of normalcy for them and their families. And now requiring then all landlords to be able to not ask the question about their criminal record or credit variability until after a conditional offer is in place. Critically important. And then source of income. Critically important as well. Those folks who own some sort of housing subsidy ought not be looked at differently than anybody else, because those subsidies, again, are in place to help them make that house payment or make that rental payment. So now they get a fair chance to be considered for a housing opportunity. And so we made progress with our fair housing law, but there still is work to do because we still have too many cases. If we've got one, we've got too many. We now are averaging between 10 to 20 cases every year of housing discrimination in Montgomery County in 2026. And so, my friends, as was stated here a little earlier by Councilmember Gerondo, housing ought not be some sort of privilege. It ought not be an option. It ought to be the law. And in fact, my friends, it is the law in Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Director Stowe for sharing your personal story and connecting it to the professional commitment that you have and that we share. We're going to read the proclamation with colleagues. Whereas the month of April is recognized as National Fair Housing Month, and this year marks the 58th anniversary of the Federal Fair Housing Act, signed into law on April 11, 1968, which affirmed the national commitment to eliminating discriminatory housing practices based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, and familial status. And
what? Oh, sorry. Whereas during Fair Housing Month, Montgomery County reaffirms its commitment to ensuring fair access to safe, stable, and affordable housing for all residents, recognizing that equitable housing is the foundation for strong families, thriving communities, and economic opportunity. And
whereas discriminatory housing practices undermine economic mobility, neighborhood stability, community trust, and equal access to opportunity. And
whereas Montgomery County has long been a leader in promoting fair housing, expanding protected categories to now include sexual orientation, presence of children, age, physical or mental disability, gender identity, source of income or family responsibilities. And
Whereas Montgomery County provides public awareness, training, and enforcement of fair housing practices to both industry professionals and residents and housing professionals across the county are encouraged to participate in activities that further fair housing awareness. And
whereas promoting fair housing requires the continued commitment of residents, housing providers, lenders, real estate professionals, advocates, public agencies, and community organizations like those behind us, working together to foster inclusive communities. And
whereas the Montgomery County Office of Human Rights, led by Director Jim Stowe, and the Interagency Fair Housing Coordinating Group have the shared responsibility and legal authority to remove barriers to housing choices, to investigate complaints about housing discrimination, and to foster a climate of fair and equal access to housing options for all of our residents. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Montgomery County Council hereby recognizes April as Fair Housing Month, and be it further resolved that the Montgomery County Council encourages all residents, businesses, institutions, and community partners to observe this month by learning about fair housing rights, supporting inclusive communities, and helping to ensure that everyone has access to housing free from discrimination, signed by the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, and in her dual capacity as Council President, on behalf of the entire Montgomery County Council. Happy Fair Housing Month.
thank you, everyone, for coming for that proclamation. Now we have another one. This is a proclamation recognizing National Public Health Week by the County Council Health and Human Services Committee. And anyone who came for that proclamation, please come forward.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Let's put this down a little. Okay. All right, we have quite... Yes, come on in. We have quite a few speakers joining us for Public Health Week, officially kicking off today. I'm so excited to be joined by my committee co-chairs. We have Councilmember Lutke and Councilmember Friedson. We also have our Director of the Department of Health and Human Services, Dr. Bridgers, our Public Health Officer, Dr. Davis. We also have our Deputy Health Director, Dr. Ashford, our Deputy Director of Health and Human Services. We also have Dr. Rogers. So I'm just going to let everyone introduce themselves, and we're going to have our speakers go next.
Hi, I'm Julie Wagner with Suburban Hospital.
Good morning again. James Bridgers, the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services.
Monica Bassi with Coforma.
Mindy Pierce, Primary Care Coalition, Nexus Montgomery.
Sean O'Donnell, Deputy Chief for Public Health Services.
Dr. Nina Ashford, Chief of Public Health Services.
Good morning, Boris Lushniak, Dean of the School of Public Health at the University of Maryland.
Good morning, Dr. Keisha Davis, your County Health Officer.
Good morning, I'm Ella Mae Gray. I'm owner of Guiding Principles Counseling Services in Gaithersburg.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Boney, and I am the immediate past president for Montgomery County Alumni Chapter Delta Sigma Theta Sorority.
Hi, I'm Pat Grant. I'm with the African American Health Program.
Good morning, Leanne Sedone, president of Suburban Hospital.
Good morning. This is Jacqueline Williams. I'm with the African American Health Program Executive Committee.
Good morning. Christopher Rogers with Public Health Services and Department of Health and Human Services.
Thank you so much. It takes a lot to take care of the public health in Montgomery County. And now I want to turn things over to one of our first speakers. We're going to hear from Dr. Keisha Davis, then the dean of my alma mater, University of Maryland, College Park. And then we're going to hear from our behavioral health specialist, Dr. Ella May, and then we are going to hear from one of our businesses that is working on innovations in helping veterans in our community before we read the proclamation.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Sales, for recognizing National Public Health Week. I am, again, Dr. Keisha Davis, your County Health Officer, and it is an honor to stand before you as we kick off National Public Health Week 2026. Our theme this year is Ready, Set, Action, which perfectly captures the momentum we feel in our community. For a long time, public health has been known as the invisible shield, the work that happens behind the scenes to keep us safe and healthy. But if the last few years have taught us anything, it's that public health must be visible, vocal, and proactive. We are ready because we've built systems and analyzed the data. We know that public health is most effective, the most effective tool we have for ensuring a long, high-quality life. But preparation is only the beginning. We are set. This year, we are focused on closing the gaps that remain. We are prioritizing health equity, ensuring that a person's race, gender, sexual orientation, housing status, zip code no longer dictate their life expectancy. And we are also confronting the infodemic by committing to being a source of truth in a sea of misinformation. Our goal is simple, making the healthy choice easy, the easy choice for everyone. And now we must take action. I ask everyone to help advocate for policy. We know that health isn't just found in the doctor's office, it's found in the policies that support walkable streets, affordable nutrition, and access to health care for all. Help us flood the feed with the national effort to flood the feed with proactive, positive, action-oriented messaging to help combat the misinformation that is so prevalent these days. And supporting mental health and well-being. Check in on your neighbors. Mental health is public health. Help us combat the epidemic of loneliness and promote social connection. And so as I close, I want to remind everybody that public health is what we do together to ensure the conditions in which everyone can thrive. We have the plan, we have the passion. Now let's take action. Happy National Public Health Week.
Thank you to our Public Health Officer, Dr. Davis. And now we will hear from University of Maryland's Dean of Public Health.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Sales, members of the Council of Montgomery County. Greetings from the University of Maryland School of Public Health at this incredible proclamation for National Public Health Week. I am the dean there. I have responsibility to basically train that next generation of public health leaders. But at the same time, as we're commemorating this at the university, it is great that Montgomery County is taking the initiative to commemorate the importance of public health in front of this incredible council and this incredible county. Now, I go back in time a little bit, and we talk about health. Dr. Davis talked about health a little bit, and I go back to the basics of what the definition of health is. The World Health Organization defines health as complete. That is somewhat aspirational, and our job is to make sure we're pointing the way towards this completeness. But complete what? Complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Listen to that again. Complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And my favorite definition of public health is CEA Winslow, 1921, that talked about, and I'll be brief here, the 3 Ps of public health. It's about preventing disease, injury, premature death, with the idea of promoting health and well-being, preventing, promoting, with the goal of prolonging a high quality of life. That's what public health is about. And this proclamation, which looks at the beginning stages, I bring this back to my students and say, look what we did in Montgomery County. I am a Montgomery County resident, proud to be so. And at the same time, we look at our current public health workers, the incredible team that's gathered here, and say, job well done, under very difficult times, and we push ahead. Why? Because much like your alma mater keeps reminding me, we are a do-good university in a do-good county, in a do-good state, in a do-good nation, despite everything that's been thrown at us. It's about doing good for our people. Thank you so much. And now, Ms. Gray.
Thank you, Dean. You see why I'm so excited about public health. And now we're going to hear from Dr. Gray.
Thank you so much. I don't get out of my office much. It's kind of like a little bubble. So I just wrote a quick speech. Good morning. I would like to begin by extending my sincere gratitude to County Council Member Lori-Ann Sayles and to the entire County Council for this invitation and for your continued commitment to the health and well-being of our community. My name is Ella Mae Gray, and I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor and the owner of Guiding Principles Counseling Services right here in our community. Today I stand before you not just as a clinician, but as a witness to silent battles, to people who show up every day smiling, functioning, providing, while quietly falling apart inside. Because the truth is, mental health does not always look like what we think it looks like. It looks like the mother who is overwhelmed but keeps going, the father who hasn't cried in years but carries the weight of everything, the teenager who says, I'm fine, but feels completely alone, the veteran who served this country and came home fighting a different war. Mental health is not a weakness. It is not a character flaw. It is a human experience. And right now in our county and across this nation, people are not just asking for help, they are hoping someone notices. At my practice, I see it every day. People don't come in because they're broken. They come in because they've been strong for too long. And what they need is not judgment, silence, or delay. They need access, compassion, and to know they're not alone. Public health is not just about physical wellness. It is about emotional, psychological, and spiritual well-being. Because when mental health is neglected, it shows up everywhere. In our homes, schools, our workplaces, and in our relationships. But here is the hope. Healing is possible. I have seen people rebuild their lives. I have seen families reconnect. Have seen individuals who once felt hopeless find purpose again. And I truly believe that when we care for the mind, we can restore the whole person. So today, I encourage all of us leaders, providers, and community members to continue creating spaces where people feel safe to speak, safe to feel, and safe to heal. And as we move forward, let us be clear. Mental health care must not become a luxury reserved for the privileged or well-connected. It is not elite. It is not designer. Mental health care is for the people, by the people, and it must be accessible to all people, regardless of income, background, or circumstance. And it is a promise we must keep to everyone. That means expanding low-cost and sliding-scale services, integrating mental health into our schools and community spaces, and supporting providers so they can sustainably serve, and reducing barriers so people can access care before they reach a crisis. And at the core of this work is something simple but powerful. Every person deserves to be seen, to be heard, and to know that their story matters. And so let us continue to do this work together. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Ella Mae Gray. Her daughter also graduated from our Youth Advisory Council, and she's a resident of Gaithersburg. So we want to thank her for all the work she's doing for holistic health. And now we'll hear from COFORMA. We have Monica with us. Thank you.
Good morning, council members and distinguished guests. I'm honored to be here with you today on behalf of COFORMA for National Public Health Week to celebrate the heartbeat of our community, our public health system. COFORMA is a creative solutions and technology modernization company that crafts inclusive products and services to improve the communities served by our clients. As a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business headquartered here in Montgomery County, healthcare is one of the key focus areas of our work. We believe health is at the heart of the human experience. Because of that, we utilize a multifaceted, human-centered approach to modernize complex healthcare systems, enhance clinician workflows, and improve patient-centered experiences. By partnering closely with our clients, we co-create progress through ethical research, accessible design, and agile engineering. And we enable them to advance health equity and improve the healthcare experiences of their customers. When we talk about public health in Montgomery County, we aren't just talking about statistics or policy, we are talking about people. The most vital role of public health is to meet communities where they are. It's about listening and really understanding the experiences of patients, caregivers, clinicians, and various service providers. Then it's moving from that understanding to building tools and systems that address real-world challenges, making quality care a reality for every individual, regardless of their zip code. Innovation in this field is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. We've seen innovation in action in the new ways the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services collect data to support millions of families, and how clinicians are using advanced data visualization tools to make life-saving decisions for veterans. These efforts aren't just building tech for tech's sake, they're building bridges to equity. Today, I also want to pause to honor any individuals in the room who serve in a public health capacity. You are the ones on the front lines dedicated to closing the gaps in our health systems and ensuring our public health infrastructure is as resilient as the people it serves. Thank you for what you do. And for all of us, may this week inspire us to continue to build a future where every person in Montgomery County and beyond has the opportunity to thrive. Together, we can make that lofty vision a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. The owner, CEO of COFORMA couldn't be here, so we appreciate Monica for her words. And now we will read the proclamation. All right. So, whereas National Public Health Week is observed during the first full week of April each year, organized by the American Public Health Association since 1995 to recognize the vital contributions of public health and highlight priority issues affecting the health of our nation, the 2026 theme, Ready, Set, Action, reflects a simple but powerful truth. Good health is not accidental, but the result of sustained action, evidence-based policy, and strong community partnerships. And
whereas for more than 150 years, public health efforts have transformed life in the United States through innovations such as vaccines, modern sanitation systems, workplace safety standards, and advances in disease prevention and emergency preparedness. These achievements have extended life expectancy and improved quality of life for millions, yet they are often taken for granted. The public health workforce, including community health workers, epidemiologists, nurses, researchers, and advocates, work every day to protect and strengthen the communities in which they serve. And
whereas Montgomery County's Department of Health and Human Services sustains a robust public health infrastructure that reaches residents across every community in our county through programs including the African American Health Program, the Latino Health Initiative, and the Asian American Health Initiative, and the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, the county addresses the social determinants of health and responds to emerging challenges. The county's Healthy Montgomery 2030 framework establishes clear benchmarks for improving health outcomes and reducing disparities across racial, ethnic, and geographic lines. And
Whereas today's public health landscape demands coordinated action to advance health equity, counter health misinformation, prepare for climate-related health risks, expand access to mental health and reproductive health care, and protect the funding and federal partnerships upon which local systems depend. Montgomery County reaffirms its commitment to science-based, equity-centered public health practice and to the dedicated professionals who make this work possible. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Health and Human Services Committee and the entire Council of Montgomery County, Maryland, hereby proclaim April 6th through April 12, 2026 as National Public Health Week and recognizes the public health professionals, community-based organizations, and government partners who work, safeguards, and advances the health and well-being of all Marylanders in Montgomery County. And be it further resolved that the County Council encourages all residents, employers, schools, and community organizations to observe National Public Health Week by taking meaningful action to strengthen community health and by supporting the public health investments on which our county's well-being depends. Presented on the 7th day of April in the year 2026 by Council members Lorianne Sales, Andrew Friedson, and Council member Don Lutke. Thank you very much to the entire Health and Human Services Committee for the proclamation. With that, we're going to move on to our council business. Madam Clerk, I will turn it over to you to share today's announcements, please.
Good morning. Thank you. The council is seeking applicants for 2 vacancies. One is for the Board of Investment Trustees for the Montgomery County Employee Retirement Plans and the Board of Trustees for the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefits Trust. The second is for the Planning Board. For this vacancy, applicants must be county residents registered to vote in Montgomery County and may be associated with any political party or unaffiliated with a political party. Applications for both vacancies are due by 5:00 p.m. on April 27th, 2026. Cover letters and resumes can be submitted by email to council.clerk@montgomerycountymd.gov. More information can be found on the council's website. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. We're going to move on to action to approve the minutes for March 9, 2026, state legislative session, and March 10th and 17th, 2026 council sessions have been circulated to the council for review. Are there any objections to approving these minutes? Seeing none, these minutes are approved. We're going to move on to our legislative session. This is day 9. There are 4 bills for final reading today. The first one is, finally, Bill 26-25, Vegetation Invasive Plants. The Transportation Environment Committee recommends enactment with amendments. Chair Glass, will you please share the committee's recommendations?
Thank you very much, Madam President. Here at the Council, we are tasked with doing a lot of things, including providing housing and health care and transportation. and a thriving economy, but we are also tasked with being good stewards of our local ecosystem, which is why I introduced the Native Plant Protection Act, which is to promote the growth of native plants and also prohibit the sale of invasive running bamboo. If you have a neighbor who has bamboo on their property, you know all about it, and you know how bad it can spread up to 15 feet a year, destroying concrete patios and sidewalks and crowding out other plant species. And I want to be clear that this bill does not require residents to remove bamboo from their own yards, but we want to prevent that bamboo from spreading. We are in a climate emergency, and we do need our native plants to help protect us. Native trees, shrubs, grasses, they help protect our soils and improve our air quality, and also provide critical habitats for birds, bees, butterflies, and other species. This legislation is an important step in making Montgomery County a model for native plant protection against the threat of invasive plants. I want to thank all the environmental leaders for working with us over the last number of months on this legislation, including the Montgomery County Sierra Club, Nature Forward, Conservation Montgomery, Tree Friends United, Friends of Sligo Creek, and the entire environmental ecosystem here in Montgomery County. For these reasons, the Transportation and Environment Committee unanimously supported the legislation with amendments. The committee redefined weeds as invasive plants in accordance with the Maryland Department of Agriculture and Maryland Invasive Species Council. It enables DEP rather than DHCA to respond to plant overgrowth that may threaten public safety. It clarifies the definition of invasive running bamboo. It exempts bamboo houseplants and bamboo food products from being prohibited for sale, and it also prohibits future planting of invasive bamboo in Montgomery County. I want to thank my two colleagues on the T&E committee for the work session on this, and also thank Councilmembers Stewart and Balcom for being original co-sponsors. Madam President, I believe that Mr. Ogorzelik also has some amendments that might need to be adopted to further clarify the committee work.
Noted. Thank you so much for that report. I'm going to turn it to our staff to please go through those amendments.
Sure. The Council Chair Glass did a pretty good job of setting forth what happened at committee. I'll just quickly run through that, starting on page 3 through page 6 of the staff report is where we have the amendments that were set forth in the recommended by the committee. There's an additional amendment that Councilmember Glass is offering to sort of clarify some of the work that was done in committee to make sure that the true intent of what Councilmember Glass's offered amendments were, as well as the lead sponsor, the ad introduction, and what the committee intended to do were more clear. And that is what, if the council members can look up at the screens or on their screens, there is an amendment that addresses the definition of weed. So this is in Article 1. It looks like more is going on there than is actually occurring because some of it is undoing what was done at committee. That first bracketed portion that first double bracketed portion that you'll see where you have an enumerated list of weeds, that was already in the bill at introduction. The vast majority of those are actually weeds that are already in current law. The single underlined ads were added at introduction. The committee had removed the enumerated list in a goal of pointing to state resources, but the problem that was uncovered after committee and when we more fully looked into it is that the list held by the Maryland Invasive Species Council is extremely broad. It's probably broader than what folks were considering when this was advertised for public hearing. It's probably broader than what the committee was fully understanding and wanting to require individuals to remove from yards. Things that you might see on here are Bradford pears, Japanese maples, weeping willows, things that there was not the intent from the committee, or if I can speak of the lead sponsor, to capture. And so this amendment would remove, and that's the double bracket you can see there at the second to last set of double brackets where it reads, or any terrestrial or aquatic plant identified by the Maryland Invasive Species Council as an invasive species of concern in Maryland. That section that was added by committee would be removed. The bill would keep, this amendment would keep in the bill the express reference to the noxious weeds identified by the Secretary of Agriculture at the state level. This is important just to clarify. There are a couple different lists, frankly, of things in the Maryland code that are identified as weed or as invasive, and the state takes a different stance depending on which list it's on, whether that weed needs to be removed or whether it's just prohibited for sale. So this points to the appropriate state list where the Department of Agriculture has determined that species ought to be removed for the good of the state. And that list, to be very clear, does encompass almost everything that's in the enumerated list. You will see, to get to the enumerated list, we've added back into that enumerated list, so we're doing some do-si-do back and forth here. And the reason that is that there are certain items, specifically poison ivy, ragweed, and kudzu, which are not encompassed in the Secretary's list of noxious weeds. They have already been regulated by the county. They're already subject to this law. So this is really just returning back to what is existing in current law and what was introduced by the lead sponsor. And if we could go to the next slide, just for everyone's ease and understanding of where all this lands us, if this amendment is adopted, this would be the new definition of weed. It has the enumerated list. That enumerated list is largely, about a little bit over half of that is already in current Montgomery County law. The other part of that list was included in the bill at introduction. It has express reference to the Secretary of Agriculture's list of noxious weeds. That was already sort of included in current law, but is a little bit clearer which list we're pointing to. And then what is removed from the current law, all that's removed from the current law, is the Department of DHCA's discretion to add to that list. And so this is an effort to keep it at this current codified list in the county, as well as that which is set by regulation by the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture as a noxious weed.
Madam President, I would like to move that amendment, and I want to thank Mr. Gorzelek for getting into the weeds of this legislation. If ever there is a time to use that pun, it is now. But I appreciate the due diligence. It is what took a little while to figure out. But with my colleagues' consideration, I'd like to adopt that amendment and then move the bill.
So we have an amendment by Councilmember Glass, second by Councilmember Don Lukey. Would you like to say something?
Yes. Now, I too wanted to thank Mr. Orgorzelak for his detailed work on this. I'm not going to make a pun, but this is complex, and there is a lot of nuance there, and the care and attention you took in your work with respect to this to make sure we're all getting it right and getting it in a way that is workable and usable and gets us the achieved result that we are seeking is really, really important. And so I appreciate that, because you did use more of a surgical application to how you wordsmith this and made it right, as opposed to a machete, right? We don't need to take that tactic, and you really did this with great grace and diligence. So thank you for that. And I was happy to second the amendment and happy to be a co-lead sponsor on this bill. So looking forward to putting this to rest.
All in favor of the amendment, please raise your right hands. It passed unanimously. I don't see anybody. Is there anything else? No? The chair of the committee?
I'd like to move the amended bill.
There is a motion to approve Bill 26-26 as amendment. This is a second by Councilmember Don Lukey. This is a roll call. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Lukey?
Yes.
Councilmember Lukey votes yes. Councilmember Mink?
Yes.
Councilmember Mink votes yes. Councilmember Sales?
Yes.
Councilmember Sales votes yes. Councilmember Stewart?
Sorry, yes.
Councilmember Stewart votes yes. Councilmember Glass?
Yes.
Councilmember Glass votes yes. Councilmember Katz?
Yes.
Councilmember Katz votes yes. Councilmember Friedson?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedson votes yes. Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Evans votes yes. Councilmember Jawando?
Yes.
Councilmember Jawando votes yes. Councilmember Balcom?
Yes.
Councilmember Balcom votes yes. Councilmember Finding Gonzalez.
Yes.
Councilmember Finding Gonzalez votes yes.
And it passed unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. Glass. We're going to move on to a much easier bill. No weeds in this one. And it's my bill. It's Bill 1-26, Human Rights and Civil Liberties, County Minimum Wage, Actual Impact Analysis Amendments. A joint Economic Development and Fiscal Policy and Health and Human Services Committee recommends enactments. There are no amendments. I'll read the report. As Chair of Economic Development, as you all know, back in November 2017, Montgomery County increased the minimum wage to $15 an hour through a phased schedule, and that ended in 2024, and required annual inflation adjustments thereafter. The bill also mandated the Office of Legislative Oversight, known by me as OLO, prepare an annual report to the Council by January 31st, assessing the implementation of the minimum wage and its impact on the local economy. This bill only eliminates that requirement by OLO to complete that report. That's all it does. So with that, I look forward to having a vote. Does my co-chair want to say anything from the HHS committee?
We just want to thank Council President Fani Gonzalez for introducing the legislation. It's been in existence for quite some time, and we want to ensure that the Office of Legislative Oversight is tasked with the challenging decisions that are going to help keep our economy moving forward, and not the research that it took to create this report that they really don't even have access to anymore because it has been eliminated by the federal government. And so we're going to have to find new and more innovative ways to track how wage is growing in our economy, how it's increasing, and how it's actually supporting a living wage for residents who live here in Montgomery County. So appreciate the simple introduction on this legislation and look forward to voting in support of it.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve Bill 1-26, Human Rights and Civil Liberties, County Minimum Wage, Actual Impact Analysis and Amendments?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Lori Ansel, second by Councilmember Don Lukey. This is a roll call. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Lukey?
Yes.
Councilmember Lukey votes yes. Councilmember Mink?
Yes.
Councilmember Mink votes yes. Councilmember Sales?
Yes.
Councilmember Sales votes yes. Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart votes yes. Councilmember Glass?
Yes.
Councilmember Glass votes yes. Councilmember Katz?
Yes.
Councilmember Katz votes yes. Councilmember Friedson?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedson votes yes. Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Evans votes yes. Councilmember Dwando?
Yes.
Councilmember Dwando votes yes. Councilmember Balcom?
Yes.
Councilmember Balcom votes yes. Councilmember Fani Gonzalez?
Yes.
Councilmember Fani Gonzalez votes yes.
Thank you. It passed unanimously. Congratulations to Olo. That's for you. The next item is 1C, is action on Bill 7-26, Buildings, Scope and Applicability, Exceptions, Buildings or Structures Used Exclusively for Agricultural Purposes, Amendments. The Economic Development Committee recommends enactment with an amendment. As the chair of Econ, I'll share the report very quickly and I'll ask staff to add anything. But it's a very simple bill. It basically defines, Bill 7-26 will define agriculture purpose in Chapter 8 to clarify that it includes the business, administration, or management of agriculture and the processing of agricultural products to prepare the product for market. There was also a amendment in committee, and basically it clarifies the relationship between Chapter 8 and the state law. So it's basically a bill to clarify everything that we do in the county. And I must say that the Department of Permitting Services, DPS, was present and they were 100% in agreement. And I feel that I had to say that for the record. I see Councilmember Don Lukey would like to speak. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. I too want to echo thank you to the Department of Permitting Services for their care and attention at that committee work session, and also for being able at the committee work session to ensure that we had a shared understanding of all folks involved from the Office of Ag and the Department of Permitting Services as to how this language should be interpreted. I believe we were pretty all clear about that legislative record, and we appreciate everyone's commitment and attention to that detail and expect that it will guide the implementation of this bill going forward. And to reiterate the why of this, the testimony at our public hearing on this bill underscored how difficult it has been for farmers to secure approvals for routine improvements that is hand-in-hand part of the ongoing agricultural operation of their farm, with delays stretching for months or longer. And so this is critically important to keeping farming thriving here in the 21st century and for generations to come. And I appreciate my co-lead sponsors, Council President Fanny Gonzalez and Council Vice President Marilyn Balcom, and co-sponsors Councilmember Sales, Evans, and Katz for getting on board with this. Thank you all.
Thank you. Council Vice President Marilyn Balcom.
Yes, just briefly, I think this is a great example of how we can make it easier to do business in Montgomery County, and we always have to remember that farming is a business, and we want to make sure that they thrive. So I appreciate everyone's work on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else to add? Everything has been said. Beautiful. So we have a recommendation from the Economic Development Committee. There is a roll call for this. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Lukey?
Yes.
Councilmember Lukey votes yes. Councilmember Mink?
Yes.
Councilmember Mink votes yes. Councilmember Sales?
Yes.
Councilmember Sales votes yes. Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart votes yes. Councilmember Glass? Yes. Councilmember Glass votes yes. Councilmember Katz?
Yes.
Councilmember Katz votes yes. Councilmember Friesen?
Yes.
Councilmember Friesen votes yes. Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Evans votes yes. Councilmember Jawando? Councilmember Jawando votes yes. Councilmember Balcom? Councilmember Balcom votes yes. Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez?
Yes.
Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez votes yes.
And it was unanimous. Thank you so much for council staff for all your help, and the Office of Agriculture too, and DPS. Now we're going to move on to the final bill for action today, and it's Expedited Bill 10-26, Arts and Humanities Council amendments. There is a recommendation by the Education and Culture Committee, as well as the Government and Operations Fiscal Policy Committee, with amendments. Chair Jawando, can you please share the report?
Yes, thank you. The Education and Culture and Government Operations Committee voted unanimously, 5-0, to recommend enactment of Expedited Bill 1026 with a few amendments. The Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County has served this county in a great way for over 50 years, and in the last fiscal year, 8 fiscal years, it's distributed over $50 million to arts organizations, artists, and others, and to maintain our public art. This bill will ensure that the governance framework matches the scale of the investment that we've rightly put in the arts. It'll establish a formal board that's appointed by the county executive and confirmed by the council, made some adjustments to that board. It creates clear reporting requirements, and it introduces a 5-year designation cycle with an OLO performance evaluation. The committee adopted 3 amendments, one requiring equitable grant-making standards as part of the Arts and Humanities Council racial equity policy, which they've already been doing, but it puts it on paper and makes it consistent with OLO's recommendation. Ensuring all reporting goes to both the executive and the council, and reinforces the ethics requirements in the bylaws around training, conflict disclosures, and reporting of violations. There were 17 arts organizations that submitted a joint letter of support, and this bill is going to strengthen a really important institution and bring its governance up to modern standards. So with that, it was a unanimous recommendation.
Thank you for that report. And council staff, do you have anything else to add?
Great, thorough summary. Nothing to add. Thank you.
Beautiful. So we have a recommendation by the Education and Culture Committee and the GO Committee as well. This is a roll call. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Lukey?
Yes.
Councilmember Lukey votes yes. Councilmember Mink?
Yes.
Councilmember Mink votes yes. Councilmember Sales?
Yes.
Councilmember Sales votes yes. Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart votes yes. Councilmember Glass?
Yes.
Councilmember Glass votes yes. Councilmember Katz?
Yes.
Councilmember Katz votes yes. Councilmember Friedson?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedson votes yes. Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Evans votes yes. Councilmember Joando?
Yes.
Councilmember Joando votes yes. Councilmember Balcom?
Yes.
Councilmember Balcom votes yes. Councilmember Finding Gonzalez?
Yes.
Councilmember Finding Gonzalez votes yes.
And it passed unanimously. Thank you so much for all your work. We're going to move on to the council's considerations for FY 27-32 Capital Improvements Program. As you all know, we continue to review committees' work on reviewing projects. Let me just remind everybody that the council will take action on the entire CIP and operating budget in May. So whatever decisions are happening today, they're not final. Just a reminder. We're going to start with the Agricultural Land Preservation with the PHP Committee. Can please the chair please submit the report?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. This item actually was scheduled to be at committee on March 16th. Ultimately, because of the inclement weather, we canceled that session. It's not a controversial item. The Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee has previously resolved some of the dynamics in this item from previous years to make sure that the funding goes to agricultural land preservation specifically and exclusively, which was always the intent. There was a change that was made for fiscal reasons and fiscal constraints to relieve some pressure out of the general fund. It took several years of advocacy, but ultimately we have done that. So now this is a very straightforward item. We have the Office of Agriculture here with us, as well as council staff, but ultimately this project provides funds for the purchase of agricultural and conservation easements under the county's agricultural land preservation legislation. Easements restrict certain uses on a property to ensure it's preserved for agricultural and rural uses for generations moving forward, and most of the acreage protected has been from the transfer development rights, a conversation that we continue to have and need to revisit and intend to as well. The total expenditures in the program, including funding recommended for the FY 27-32 CIP, totals $26,123,000, and it's a mix of agricultural transfer tax, contributions, developer payments, investment income, and state aid, and there's no current revenue in the recommended CIP. So non-controversial item, didn't go to committee, so it would require a motion, and I'm happy to move at the appropriate time.
Does council staff or from the executive team have anything else to add? And I don't see anyone wanting to ask any questions. It was very straightforward. Thank you so much for that report. We have a motion by the by the PHP committee, second by Councilmember Will Joando. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And it passed unanimously. Thank you so much for coming today. We're going to move on to the next Capital Improvements Program work session, and it's on culture and recreation, the Wheaton Arts and Culture Center. I'm going to ask the Chair of Education and Culture Committee, Chair Joando, to please share the report.
Absolutely. We remain excited about the Wheaton Arts and Cultural Recreation Center. Mr. Assant is here. The committee recommended approval of this project. It was reviewed on February 19th, and it was unanimous approval. As the executive put forward, it's a 6-year total of $45.2 million for the Wheaton Arts and Cultural Center. This is a $6.9 million increase from the amended CIP due to more detailed cost estimates as we've nailed down more of those details from the contractor in the advancement of the building design. I will turn it over to staff if there's anything to add, but it was a unanimous vote.
No further details. Thank you.
Back to you, Madam President.
So we have a recommendation by Education and Culture Committee. I don't see anybody else wanting to speak, and I think we passed this without objection. Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much for coming today. We're going to move on to agenda item 3, a briefing on the FY27 operating budget. Our Executive Director, Mr. Howard, and Deputy Director, Mr. Smith, are with us this morning to provide an overview of the FY27 operating budget. Very exciting. As they come in with the County Executives team, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know you all work very hard on this proposal from the County Executive, and it must be thrilling to see how we dig into it. I know, I'm making that assumption. I just want to highlight a couple of things that I shared with colleagues on a budget memo that I presented about, I will say 3 weeks ago at this point. There are certain things from the County Executive that he proposed that I am putting on hold. One of them is a special taxing district. As I mentioned in the memo, this county council agreed to put together a work group on the infrastructure funding. And that work group is going to be releasing the report in June. So this recommendation by the county executive should go to that group so they can report in one cohesive manner. So that's one. The second thing was regarding the solid waste disposal. It's a conversation that has been delayed, not by us, but by the county executive. And I look forward to having a deep and comprehensive conversation about trash in the fall, because it should not take part during the budget process. And so that's two. And then three, we look forward to having a conversation with the council on the property and income tax increases that the county executive is proposing. I just want to remind colleagues that if you're going to be against any tax increases, then please get ready to propose some cuts, because you cannot have it both ways. That's all I'm going to say. And with that, I turn it to council staff to go over their report. Thank you.
Terrific. Good morning. As the council president noted, Mr. Smith and I will provide an overview of the executive's FY27 recommended operating budget. We'll go over some of the topics and decision points that the council will have to tackle over the next month and a half as the council's portion of the budget process officially kicks off today with our first public hearings this afternoon and this evening. Also want to thank our colleagues from the executive branch who are here and will be available to answer any questions and any discussion after the presentation, and will always do a great job working collaboratively with us so we can provide you all the information you need to make the budget decisions that you need to make. So our presentation this morning will include some context on the FY27 operating budget. We'll summarize the executive's racial equity and social justice framework included in his budget. We'll summarize some of the key elements of the recommended budget, as well as the summary of how the budget aligns with the different various councils and counties' fiscal policies. And then we'll also review the council president's budget approach and some of the scenarios that we were asked to provide as part of this overview discussion. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Smith to walk through the next group of slides.
Thank you. Good morning, Council. So each year, the Council must go through a budget with multiple decisions, a series of them to balance a budget each year. But this year, we also wanted to look at the context of how this budget, how the executive's recommended budget fits into the overall picture for the last few years. We also acknowledge there's a lot of uncertainty going on in both the national and global economy and other things, but we're not going to get into that today. We're going to be mostly looking at how the fiscal 27 budget, again, fits into the last few years. And what has happened for the last few years? Well, the county's revenues have grown historically. So for the last 4 fiscal years, we've seen 6.1% annual growth rate. That's very similar to what we saw right before the Great Recession during the housing boom in the early aughts. And as you can see here, the prior 10 years only had about a 3% growth rate. And both generated about the same total dollars in terms of the annual operating budget in terms of tax supported revenues. And so in the last 4 years, we've seen almost $1.4 billion of annual revenues come in to tax supported. Where does that money come from? It's come from our businesses and residents here. Almost 80% of that $1.4 billion, $1.1 billion has come from income and property taxes alone. Since the income tax for the county is a flat 3.2%, we know that roughly in the last 4 years there's been $18 billion in taxable growth for income. We know that that's not been distributed evenly because different households have different incomes, but it has been $18 billion of income growth here in the county that's resulted in more than $500 million in annual growth for the income tax. Likewise, property values have increased significantly. They've increased faster than inflation for the last 4 years, and that has driven, for the most part, our growth in property taxes. So what has the county done with this money? We've invested it into our agencies, and so we've increased expenditures, tax-supported expenditures in the county government over the last 4 years by a total of about $1.5 billion, which was an annual growth rate of 6.7%. Again, looking at the previous 10 years before that, it was only about 3.1% growth. And so on average, our growth has been around 3% coming out of the Great Recession, both in terms of revenues and in terms of expenditures. But the last 4 years have been very different. And again, that's part of the context as we go into the fiscal 27 operating budget. Where did that money specifically go? Well, it went into our agencies and a little bit of debt service. And so we see that the average growth rate for the county government has been close to 8%. With on average of $620 million, with a total of $620 million added to its expenditures. MCPS has also increased by 7.1%, or a total of $803 million. That's not all county funding. Some of that includes the state funding received as well, because that's tax supported. Park and planning is seen a similar increase of about 6.5%, although in terms of raw dollars, smaller because its total budget is smaller. Montgomery College and debt service are the outliers, partly because Montgomery College has been running lean and been a great partner in that process, and so their growth has been modest. And then, great thanks to the council's work on spend and affordability, our debt service has also seen modest growth in the last few years. So as we finish up with the context, we wanted to offer kind of just an illustration of where we are, where we were, and where we're going. So here's the previous years before we saw the growth. This is total growth in tax-supported revenues over year to year. Again, around 3%. In the last 4 years, we've seen a significant growth. This is the 6.1% annual average growth, and that's far significant compared to what we saw in those 10 years. What do we see in the executive's recommended budget? We've seen pretty good growth in fiscal 27, and then it tapering off as we get into the later fiscal years, going back much more to our average of 3%. However, the fiscal 27 revenues do include the executive's recommended 6.3-cent property tax increase and the income tax increase. So if we phase those out, our growth is back to normal. It's back to 3%. And so that is the context of the fiscal 27 operating budget. We've had 4 years of significant growth, but we're getting ready to return back to modest growth. And so while we jump into the fiscal 27 operating budget, I'll talk a little bit about the executive's approach for racial equity and social justice. The Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice did use an operating budget equity tool again in fiscal 27. We've seen several versions of this the last few years. This one is back to a numerical score, a rating of 1 to 11. And so council staff will be including that in each of their reports for the department and office operating budgets in Montgomery County government. Outside agencies were not rated. And then obviously during the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, there'll be discussion about the specific budget tool with the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice when that department or that office is reviewed. So what are the key elements of the fiscal 27 recommended budget by the executive? There are many, but these are the high points. So the first one is a 6.3 cents property tax increase for MCPS. Again, this is the third time in 4 years the executive has recommended an increase in property taxes using the supplemental MCPS rate. And as we'll note in a minute, it almost doubles the increase for the average homeowner in the county for fiscal 27. The executive has also recommended an increase to income taxes going from 3.2% to 3.3%. This would result in about $1 per $1,000 of new taxable income for each individual filer. One thing to note is that the county's income tax is collected over 3 tax years in each fiscal year, and so there's a modest increase of about $24 million in fiscal 27. The full phase-in of this, should the council approve it, wouldn't occur until 28 and 29. Also noted is the executive did recommend an increase to the working family income supplement to create some progressivity. And as council staff will note during the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, most of the progressivity would only occur if the county approved actual tiers to the income tax. The working family income supplement is a crude tool to provide progressivity, but most homeowners do not, or most households do not benefit from that actual program based on requirements. As already noted by the council president, the county executive had two major policy items in his budget beyond the tax increases, one for solid waste disposal and one for the special transportation taxing districts. We won't go into those much because the council president has already spoke about them. And then finally, there are a slew of other fee changes recommended by the executive in this budget. Water quality protection charge is increasing again. The solid waste disposal fees are increasing. The 911 fees are increasing. And the community use of public facilities fees are increasing. And so council staff will look through all of those as we go into the budget, but there's plenty there to dig into. What does that mean for the average homeowner in fiscal 27, at least in terms of a tax bill? It means based on growth in assessments, which have been historically high as property values have increased coming out of COVID, on average, most homeowners, regardless of what area they're in, will see probably an average increase of about 6% this year. The executive has recommended 6.3% increase to the property tax rate is also about 6%. And so in effect, the executive's recommendation will double the increase in property tax bills, which is what this shows. The solid waste and water quality protection charges are more modest this year, but nonetheless, this is on average what a homeowner will see based on these values for fiscal 27 should the council approve the executive's recommended budget. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Howard for the next few slides.
Okay, so we're going to dig in a little bit more to some of the components of the budget, starting with how the executive recommends funding for each agency. Overall, the executive recommends a tax-supported operating budget of just over $7 billion, which is an increase of $375 million from FY26, or a 5.7% growth rate. And you can see how it's distributed amongst the agencies. County government growing at 5.9% and MCPS growing at 5.7% are the biggest growth areas, both in terms of percentage and dollar amounts. Debt service does have by percentage is growing, but at a much smaller dollar amount. So this next slide provides a more detailed breakdown of kind of the crosswalk, the growth in agencies, focusing a little bit more detail on this slide on Montgomery County government. And as you can see, for county government, the $138.3 million of tax-supported increase, there is about $55 million worth of compensation and benefit cost changes that are embedded in those different numbers. And we'll get into a little bit more detail on those costs in just a minute. There's $27.6 million in proposed additions and enhancements to department budgets. And there's also the $28.8 million for the state pension shift for MCPS and Montgomery College employees. This includes the $21 million that was shifted last year that was originally appropriated to the MCPS and college budgets, but then needed to be shifted back to the county government budget. And it also does assume the additional about $8 million that the state has proposed shifting this year. We won't know that finally until the state passes their budget, but it looks like that will happen as well. For MCPS, go back to this, stay on that slide. For MCPS, the $192.3 million tax-supported increase is primarily from the local county contribution, $179.6 million of it. There is $12.7 million increase in non-county funds, and that is state aid increase. The Montgomery College increase of $12.4 million is split half and half between a local contribution increase and a state aid increase. Next slide. So this slide digs a little bit deeper into the compensation elements of the budget by showing the proposed FY27 pay adjustments for the two largest agencies, county government and MCPS. We go into a little bit more detail on the compensation aspect as part of this presentation because there's a different timeline that the council has to act on compensation for county government. So we need to start that conversation and get into those details a little bit earlier than some of the individual departmental pieces. So for county government, the executive recommends general wage adjustments of 3% for FOP and police management, 2.5% for IAFF and fire management, 2.85% for most McGeo employees as well as non-represented MLS employees. I'll come back to the deputy sheriff and correctional officers in a minute. And the executive recommends a 3.5% service increment for all county government employees not at topic grade. So all told, employees depending on the bargaining unit, years of service, and position type could receive increases ranging from 2.5% to 6.5%. For the McGeo deputy sheriff and correctional officers, in addition to the GWA and the increment if they are eligible, they would also receive a salary schedule adjustment, which functions similar to a GWA in that it increases the entire scale that employees work under. In the staff report, we had noted that this adjustment was 1.57%, but have since learned yesterday that that is the minimum and the actual adjustment varies. And so we don't have the full numbers yet for the correctional officers, but for deputy sheriffs, our initial calculations show that employees could receive pay increases ranging from 4.42% to 10.6% because of the addition of the salary schedule adjustment as well. And so we'll, of course, have a lot more information about this when we take the compensation and benefits discussion to the GO committee and then to the full council over the next couple weeks. For MCPS, the Board of Education requests general wage adjustments of 3.25% and service increments. Within MCPS, the service increment varies from 1.5 to 5.5% with an average of 3.5%. So those employees would be receive anywhere from 3.25 to 8.75%. Next slide. So this next slide shows the FY27 cost of the pay adjustments as well as cost increases to pay for existing benefit levels. You know, as we talk about every year, government is a people-intensive business, and it's makes sense that the biggest cost component of government is the people, and so the compensation costs play a big role in the increases in how the budget changes in any given year. So for FY27, the proposed pay adjustments will cost approximately $47.4 million for county government and $161.6 million for MCPS. This year, the driver is primarily pay adjustments as opposed to benefit cost increases, which is a little bit different than last year, but there are also a lot of puts and takes on the benefit side. For example, in county government, the cost increases are partially offset by the increased utilization of the OPEB trust for retiree current year retiree health costs under the policy adopted by the council in 2023. And the MCPS costs are partially offset by just natural reductions in retirement costs and variation from year to year. For county government, I do want to note there's a proposed enhancement to the RSP and GRIP retirement plans that shows a $3.2 million cost for FY27, but it is part of a multi-year phased-in enhancement that's estimated to cost approximately $13 million by FY28. And for MCPS, they did include a $40 million increase towards their structural issues in their employee benefit fund, and we'll have more information about that issue in both the GO and E&C committee work sessions. So the last slide I'll go over looks at the potential structural deficit for FY28. The recommended fiscal plan estimates that there will be a $61 million deficit in new revenue available for agency uses in FY28. So absent any further revenue changes, even with the proposed tax increase, the county would potentially be looking at a deficit to start FY28 and the hole that would need to be filled. The executive's budget also includes known or likely FY28 expenditures of $196.3 million for including annualization of FY27 pay adjustments and replacing the use of one-time reserves for ongoing expenditures. So all told, this data shows a potential gap of $257.3 million, which for context would be equivalent to a 9.85-cent tax increase. Now, as we've discussed in prior years, the exact number for the structural deficit is not the most important part or the most important takeaway from this, as that number can and will change before the next council is looking at the budget next year. It could change to the good, or it could change to the bad. We're not sure. It depends on what happens in the national economy and the local economy. But the more important thing is the overall scale of the potential deficit. And so tying it back to Mr. Smith's slides earlier, when you have a revenue growth of 6.1%, but 6.7% expenditure growth during the same period due to the use of reserves, you're at the risk of a long-term structural imbalance, and that's something that the next executive, next council may have to deal with, depending on how things play out in the economy. So I'll turn it back to Mr. Smith for the next slides.
Thank you. Bringing it home, we'll go through the county's fiscal policies briefly that the council considers each year and has adopted. And so for as Mr. Howard noted, the executive is recommending again a use of one-time reserves of $191.1 million in this budget because we're exceeding the 10% policy level. Based on our rough estimate, about $181.5 million of that, as Mr. Howard noted, is for ongoing expenditures. And so all told, we will end fiscal 27 at about 10.6%, a little bit above the 10% policy level, with a total of $781.9 million. But it should be noted that most of that is in the Revenue Stabilization Fund. The undesignated reserves, which is the fund that taps in the quickest, the easiest, and the most, will be at about $46 million. And just for context, the rough estimate for snow cleanup in January and February is between $40 and $50 million of unbudgeted expenditures. And then like last year, given the growth of the Revenue Stabilization Fund and interest, it's likely the council will need to approve language to not have the the Revenue Stabilization Fund exceed 10% again using budget language. And we will be reviewing that and looking at that as we get closer to the end of budget. And then finally, we'll just note that the spending affordability the council approved in February was exceeded by almost $300 million in this budget. And so that will be, unless the council elects to not fund $300 million roughly in this budget, the council will be looking at exceeding the aggregate operating budget at the end of its process. And then as council is considering a full CIP this year, a full capital improvements program, we just wanted to note that the CE did recommend a debt service budget with projections based on his recommended borrowing, which exceeds the spend and affordability that the council has approved. And based on those projections, it's adding at least $83.4 million annually to that debt service budget over the next few years. And most importantly, debt service takes 20 years to filter out. And so beyond 32, we would expect those expenditures to continue to increase into the $100 to $120 million annually. And then finally, OPEB trust currently usage does align with county policy in this recommended budget. And so now we'll move on to approach. The council president's already mentioned much of that, so we'll show this slide for context, but we're going to go ahead and move on since we've been going through this for a little bit, and this is already summarized in her excellent memo. So one of the things that was requested is that council staff look at different tax rates and reserve options. So much like last year, we've come up with 3 scenarios. These are illustrative. They're not recommended in terms of actual reductions. One thing that we'll note is that the 6.3 cents is was maximum, I should say, that the executives recommended. The council can approve anywhere between 0 to 6.3, or any number in between, or any number below that. The council has full discretion. And so we picked 3 scenarios we thought that would be, again, illustrative of kind of the reductions that would be needed to meet these needs. And so the first one is not approving any of the property or income tax increases, and also trying to eliminate the estimated structural deficit, as Mr. Howard noted. And so total reductions would need to be in the range of about $446 million. And so we've distributed that based on the pro rata share of each of these agencies. However, the most important note is MCPS and Montgomery College both have MOE laws, and so those are maximum for them, and therefore that is the most that the council could reduce in this budget while meeting that law. Scenario 2 looks at just the tax increases on the property and income tax, and so if the council elects not to do a property or income tax increase, it would need to find about $189 million in reductions. Most notably, this would also keep reserves roughly at the same level, which, as I noted a minute ago, would be about $46 million in undesignated reserves. And again, this would be illustrative of reductions needed, again, if you wanted to do them based on the pro rata share of the current tax-supported expenditures. And then finally, scenario 3 is doing some of the tax increase for property, which at about 3 cents, so about half, but not doing the income tax and not doing anything in reserves. And this gets an estimate about $110.6 million. And so, again, this is would be illustrative of the reductions needed. None of the MOE laws come into play in this. And again, that would be something the council would need to consider as we go through the operating budget. And so with that, we will conclude and turn it back over to the council president for questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the detailed presentation. If anybody has questions, comments, this is the time to do so. Please just let me know so I can call your name. I am worried, and I went back to my comments from last year's when we voted on the budget, and I said it. This particular year is going to be very bad, and it's getting worse. Mostly also because of the person that we have as president right now. He's so unstable, and it's affecting everyone, but especially the Washington D.C. region. So I feel like I had to say that. And just get us ready for because not just this year, the next couple of years are going to be very unpredictable. And we need to keep that in mind as we go through this budget. And that is no joke. It's just the amount of people that have been laid off and how that has affected us. People who we never saw getting food at one of our food hubs, we're seeing them today. And that's just a red flag. And so that's something I wanted to say. In the structural deficit that we have, it's really concerning. So I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to start with our Council Vice President, Marilyn Balcom.
Thank you. As always, it's a very thorough report and really puts things in perspective as we begin to look at the operating budget. And I have great concerns as well. I think that we see that our annual expenses, our growth rate is higher than the expense rate is higher than our growth rate. And if we pass this tax increase this year, it's not just the burden on taxpayers, it's the additional burden for all the years to come. It just adds to the structural deficit. And so when we look at what happens in the out years, we already know that it's going to be bad in FY28, but we could do something about it this year. And I appreciate the Council President saying at the very beginning, if individually we're not in favor of increasing taxes, then we individually need to look at where the cuts are and where the cuts should be. I feel like we need to do that work. So I think that I just want to say that at the beginning of this process is that 6% tax increase is a lot for some of our residents to handle, and but I do recognize that our need has grown significantly as well. But I feel like if we don't look at this very seriously and cut, it's a short-term gain, and we just continue to dig ourselves into a hole. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Kate Stewart.
Thank you. Again, thank you for the excellent work. As always, thank you to the execs team in finance and OMB. Appreciate it. I think one thing I want to lift up and see if anyone from OMB or finance wants to speak to this is the $181.5 million of reserves going for ongoing uses. I think we can debate here property taxes and where we may be on that, but this really I'm just going to say it really scares me, and leaving so little in our reserves. Because as the Council President said, given what we are facing, not just on a national, but a global scale right now, what may happen at 8:05 p.m. tonight, the idea that we would leave so little in our reserves and knowingly use this almost over $180 million for ongoing operating out of our reserves, which is just generally not a good practice. How we can justify that. I know the need has been great, but one of the things that we've been able to do with the growth that has been identified was keep healthy reserves so that when we had emergencies like this fall, when we had the shutdown and we were approaching the holidays and heard from folks doing food work and housing that they needed an infusion of cash before the holidays, we were able to jump on that and do that. What is being proposed to us now ties our hands on that. And I think that's the piece of this that I'm struggling with right now to figure out how we approach this. Because again, we can all have very different views on property taxes and other things, but the idea that we would dip so much into our reserves and use that for ongoing costs when we know what the projections are, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. So I know we'll talk about it some more, but I didn't know if there were any thoughts or things that wanted to be said now.
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, everyone. Jennifer Bryan from the Office of Management and Budget, and certainly understand the position that Councilmember Stewart has expressed here today, and thank you for the question. And as you have stated, the needs in the community are so great. There are a lot of our folks are housing insecure, they're food insecure, they don't have medical coverage or relying on the county and our nonprofit partners to provide those types of services. And as we were going through the budget, the county executive recognized that these needs are exacerbated. They continue to be exacerbated in our community. So his goal was to at least end the reserves at the 10% target level that we've committed to our rating agencies. But the needs are there. And unfortunately for the county, our revenues have had some spikes in growth over the last several years, and we are coming back down, as the staff packet indicates, to a more normalized revenue situation. So with that, it was important for the county executive to invest in those safety net services, also to invest in infrastructure like BRT to bring forth our economic development goals. I think there is absolutely a balance to be struck in this budget. But when you get down to brass tacks, investments for affordable housing, infrastructure to bring folks into the county who may be our next economic growth or boom was all important to the county executive. Climate mitigation and moving closer to our 2030 climate goals. There's just so much here. And striking that balance was very difficult. And some of the reductions that the county executive elected to take, along with some of the investments he put into the budget, it was difficult. And difficult for him, will absolutely be difficult for all of you. So it's not lost upon the county executive of where the reserve target is. It will require, if passed by the council in this manner, it will require some level of fiscal discipline that every director and every person in this county government will have to manage. And that is very clear here. But as far as the needs that we see every day in the communities, it is exorbitant, and also contract inflation, tariffs, things like that are driving the cost of everyday business that the county delivers to its residents is really, it's a tough balance to strike.
Thank you for that, but I appreciate the question. I had to push back because using the whole idea that we need to protect the most vulnerable, which we do, and each one of us cares so much about, and use that to say this is why we're going to get into our reserves is not okay. There are ways of doing things, especially understanding that we have, as I said at the beginning, a very unstable president, and tomorrow anything crazy can happen, as is happening almost on a daily basis, creating a new war. 2 months ago it was in South America, now it's in the Middle East, Africa, you're probably next, because that's how he's acting. So taking our reserves to like that is just not, I can't comprehend that. And I'm not in support of that. So you know, and I feel my colleagues needed to know that. Next, Councilmember Don Lukey.
Thank you, Madam President, and I too want to echo Council President's statements there. And I we are all aware of the intense needs right now, right? And part of our job is to ascertain what is it that we can control for locally and what is it that we cannot. We cannot, as a local government body, deal with gas prices. We can't. That's left to forces beyond our control. Same with tariffs. We do not levy tariffs. We do, however, control our fees, our taxes, and what we are spending. And those are the areas that we absolutely must focus on. And I know that when this budget was transmitted to us, the county executive flatly told all of us, see, we're going to do this and there will be no supplementals because we're just going to dip into the reserves right now. That's insane. That is insane. And I, too, like Council Vice President Balcom, reflected upon the things I have said during the prior 3 budgets that I have been able to speak to. And every time I have cautioned about the use of one-time funds for ongoing expenses. It has been a recurring theme that I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall, but like the fact that anybody would use one-time reserves for ongoing expenses and continue to grow the structural deficit, right? When you're in a hole and you're trying to fix things and level things out, first step is to stop digging. Our county executive is asking us to buy a bigger shovel and asking our taxpayers to bear the burden of that bigger shovel because difficult decisions have repeatedly failed to be made. And that's great that he says right now that, oh, everybody's just going to have to, be more prudent. This is the 8th budget that this county executive has put forward. Prudence has not been a hallmark of those philosophies. It has not. And that puts us in a really uncomfortable position because we have to deal with this. We must deal with this. And we can't allow our deficit to keep ballooning. This is objective information. This is numbers, they don't lie. And I really do hope our residents read the packet. And I want to thank Mr. Smith and Mr. Howard for their work and all of the analysts who put all this together. Because people go out and say what they want to say to whatever constituent group is in front of them, but the numbers don't lie. And we can have compassion and empathy for the needs, but we also need to say we've got to be responsible. We absolutely have to be responsible in how we manage this, because what happens when there's another $50 million storm? And that's just that piece of it. We can't control that as a local government either, the weather. But we do need to make sure, and part of that is being prudent about how we can be prepared to meet challenges. And we won't be able to plug every hole left by the federal government. We're not trying, but we are trying to do what we can when we can. If we leave ourselves no ability to do that, we're just leaving everybody hanging. And that is because of a failure of choices to be responsible, be prudent, tighten the belt, and do the things we need to do right here, right now. And I will not say, I know, with the projected plus 250 million plus structural deficit for FY28, the proposed tax increases still leave us with that. Because again, if you do not manage the ongoing expenditures, you cannot hope to cure that. So it's not that the question is, hey, if we only raised taxes this time around, we'd fix the deficit. We'd plug that hole. We're not. It won't. And that's not baked into this plan. This plan wants you to pay more taxes, pay more fees, and then still bear the burden of that deficit moving forward. It doesn't buy us out of anything. And I know that we have to bear this for quite some time to come, right? This is not an easy road. And we need to be cautious and methodical and strategic, and also know that we have to live within our means. That is a 100% thing that has to happen right now. And it does mean we can't do everything we want to do. And I do want to appreciate, because Mr. Smith highlighted, with Montgomery College's budget, they get it. They haven't asked for the sun, the moon, and the stars. They're keeping things going. And you know what? They're delivering great services for our residents and for our students and helping people level up in their careers. That is a good thing. I want to hold that up because it's important. And it is prudent fiscal management. But we each owe an obligation to do that. And so do all of our executive departments. So with that is a clear guide to how I am looking at this budget and trying to make sure that we are not pushing our residents to the max, and we are being mindful of that which we can cure, fix, and manage locally, and that which is beyond our control. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Next, Councilmember Andrew Friedson.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you to staff. This is a sobering but very comprehensive presentation and report. Unfortunately, I'll just reiterate what I have said repeatedly for the past 8 years, that hope isn't a fiscal strategy. And it feels like every year we are revisiting this same issue. You've heard colleagues mention governing is prioritizing. It's about being a responsible steward of taxpayer dollars. And this budget, as proposed, is neither of those things. It's about understanding the limits of what we can do and what residents can actually afford. Nobody up here is talking about cuts. I want to revisit the way in which we're talking about this conversation, because it is very difficult for residents to hear us talking about cuts when the baseline are increases in their costs. And so the first question that I have is, if we pass no tax increase on residents at a time when they can't afford it, when their gas prices and their utility bills and all of their costs, including their groceries, are going up, how much will the budget increase? Just based on the 6%, as you noted, average property tax assessment increase and other increases in the budget not related to tax rate increases.
It'll take us a minute to get that number, but Mr. Smith can figure that out, unless OMB has that off the top of their head.
Okay, so if you could work on that. I mean, this is the key point here, that we're not talking about cuts. We're talking about what is the rate of increase in the county budget that we can actually afford. The county budget has increased by 44% over the last 8 years. There are very few residents whose household budgets are increasing by 44%. And you heard colleagues talk about this dynamic. This is a continued frustration that this council has been raising the alarm on, of the use of one-time funds for ongoing expenses. It is unprecedented to have a situation where year in and year out, we are increasing taxes as proposed by the county executive and increasing a structural deficit. That's almost impossible to do. And yet somehow you have figured out a way to do it. And that is crazy. So we're raising taxes on working families and increasing our fiscal problems. Generally, you ask residents to sacrifice, to pay higher costs in order to solve fiscal problems. And here we're asking residents to increase their costs and make tremendous sacrifice at a time when they are struggling more than they have before. And we're increasing our fiscal problems, and we're going to have only more issues down the road. And so we're going to ask them to pay more and more. And this is going to become, as it has, a vicious cycle. That's where you end up with a situation where tax increases have been proposed in 2020, in 2023, in 2025, and in 2026. And based on this budget, if we approve this budget, it is guaranteed that we're going to come back for more tax increases. There's just no way to pass the county executive's budget as proposed, continue on the trajectory that we're currently on, and not expect that tax increases are going to continue to go up every single year. That is not fair for residents. That is not reasonable. The one-time funds, this is the equivalent, $181 million in one-time revenue for ongoing expenses. This is the equivalent of getting a bonus or coming into a small amount of money and using that to put a down payment on a car with no plan and no ability to actually pay the monthly payments on the car. And so you are buying a car and putting yourself into debt. That's what this budget does. There is no financial advisor, no reasonable, rational person who would recommend any resident doing that. Our residents are smart enough to know that they shouldn't do that. And yet that is what this budget as proposed is asking us to do. And I'll just note on the Revenue Stabilization Fund, we talk about the 10% policy level, but as noted by staff, that's not really what we're talking about here. The RSF is prohibited from being used for anything other than to offset the reduction in expected revenues for already appropriated funds. This cannot fix a snowstorm. this cannot address the 40 or 50 million dollars that we need to, address an emergency situation as we just had, which is expected. It doesn't allow us to meet an emergency need to address the social safety net if an issue emerges. This only allows us to fund a situation where we appropriated dollars as part of this budget and the revenues fall off a cliff. And ultimately, then we are legally authorized to use largely that 10% in order to pay for it. That is the issue. So $46 million is really the only amount of money that we're talking about to solve every emergency potential challenge that we have. That's where the $181 million was supposed to go and would have gone had we been more fiscally responsible. Does staff have a number on that yet?
So for the 6-year average annual growth, with the tax increase, the average annual growth in the fiscal plan is about 3.6%, but without the tax increase, it would be about 2.8%.
But could we get the dollar amount?
Sure,
Yeah.
and we'll follow up with the specific number for FY27 with and without the tax increase.
All right, I appreciate that. The county executive, when he presented his budget to the council and then ultimately to the public, he noted a little less than $19 million in suggested efficiencies that were found, which, by the way, is 0.2% of the overall budget. So hardly, significant amount of efficiencies that were found in the scheme of asking residents to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars more on their tax bills. Do we have a detailed list of exactly what those efficiencies were, item by item?
Yes, we do. We can get that to you.
Okay. Can you share it with us, please? Because I think that would be helpful for folks to understand. And I just want to note, because it would be helpful to see those efficiencies of whether or not those are increases that were not supported or whether or not those were actual doing a deep dive into departmental budgets and finding savings, positions that are vacant, that are no longer needed, programs that are no longer working, where we can move dollars away from what's not working and move it into things that are. It would be helpful to understand that. So if you can share that with us, I would appreciate it. And I'll just note, it is hard to hear the suggestion that the reason why we're doing this is to support the social safety net. We have always supported the social safety net in Montgomery County, even in the depths of the recession, when savings plans were happening, when Ike Leggett as county executive and the former council had to make impossible decisions. They prioritized every single decision that they made, the social safety net. They made impossibly tough choices, but they made them by prioritizing the social safety net. That is the responsible and required job of governing. And so I just don't think that it is a fair thing to suggest that your taxes have to go up, and if they don't go up, then the social safety net doesn't function. That is not real, and that is not fair to residents who are struggling. And the last thing I'll just note, Donald Trump is causing costs to go up. There's no doubt about that. Tariffs, gas prices, utility costs, that is real. But it's our responsibility to determine whether or not we are going to add to the costs on residents through much higher taxes, which will likely precipitate even more tax increases down the road, probably immediately down the road, or whether or not we're going to be willing and able to make the tough choices that unfortunately the county executive has put this council in. This council colleagues are in an impossible position because the county executive failed to make the tough decisions, and now we are going to have to make some impossibly tough decisions now, and it's going to be a very challenging next couple of months. I appreciate that if you get the detailed number of those 0.2% of efficiencies that were apparently found. That's the sacrifice that the county executive has cited to suggest that this is a responsible budget. And if you could get back on the specific number this year and on the out years, without a tax increase, what the rate of growth in dollars would be for the county government, because it's very important. I'll close on this and say it again. Nobody is suggesting that we cut government. Nobody. We're talking about whether or not we are going to increase the county's budget and what increase in the county's budget we can realistically afford, and what is an appropriate use of funds that are not expected to continue, and whether or not we are creating more problems down the road than we're solving by asking residents to pay a lot more in taxes. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilmember Lorian Sells.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to my colleagues for their remarks. Thank you to staff for making sense of this very complicated and difficult budget year. At a time when we're asking our residents to do more with less, that's also our responsibility to figure out how to do more with less. And unfortunately, this budget has not done that at all. It's asking us to raise costs at a time when our residents are feeling the impact of rising costs at the gas pump, at the grocery store, at every turn. We are all feeling the squeeze. And for us to have to make the difficult decisions on where to cut, we are fielding emails from residents who are facing eviction, residents and homeowners who are facing foreclosure, childcare workers who don't know if they can afford to keep the doors open because they are losing enrollment numbers. We have parents who were RIF'd. I mean, we just did a special appropriation in December and then again in January because of our seniors and our workforce that was laid off, and Montgomery County had the highest concentration of workers. And for a budget like this to come over at this time is irresponsible and unacceptable. It's very disappointing that we are seeing, 7 and 10% increases of property tax bills when we know that income has not kept up with inflation. Now, as chair of Health and Human Services and trying to ensure that more people don't feel the brunt of, Medicaid cuts and SNAP cuts and displacement, our disability community has also sounded the alarm because of the cuts that they are facing. It's disappointing. And so while we are going to have to go line by line and make some difficult cuts, I just want to remember those populations and those emails that we are receiving and asking my colleagues to prioritize those residents who may not make it into the public hearings over the next few days, but remembering that our inboxes are filled with those letters and will continue to be filled with those letters as we make some difficult decisions. And so I'm just asking for careful line-by-line reviews of redundancies that we can cut and not care that is much needed by our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councilmember Evan Glass.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate Central staff taking the time to do their due diligence and appreciate the comments of my colleagues. There has been a lot of talk this morning about the effects that Donald Trump is having on this budget, from either tariffs or federal funding that's being withheld and additional chaos that we don't yet know about, but will certainly come down in some form or fashion. What has not been talked about regarding Donald Trump is the thousands of people he laid off, fired, and RIF'd here in Montgomery County over the last year and a half. Thousands of our neighbors who are former federal workers, who are contractors, who are now worried about their household economics. Right here, thousands of people. And this budget that the county executive has proposed will increase their burden. Now, I agree with what has been said that the need has increased across the board. That is absolutely true. But how do we help people facing economic anxiety by creating more economic anxiety? That's the conundrum that this budget is proposing. The average home in Montgomery County is approximately $645,000. And this budget increases their tax burden by $883. This is not a tax on billionaires. This is a tax proposed on the average Montgomery County homeowner. Full stop. I support progressive taxation. This is not it. This is a flat, even regressive tax. And the reason I say it's regressive is because the State Department of Taxation, of Assessments and Taxation, has been found to unfairly and unevenly assess smaller, older, more modest homes at rates compared to larger, newer, more expensive homes. The news is out there. The white papers confirm it. The assessments are regressive, and this exacerbates that. I have said ever since I joined the council that the county should take over the assessment process as the counties did decades ago. We know our communities better. We know our housing stock better. One size does not fit all. Something we should consider in the future and work with our state partners to provide us that authority to do. But while that is half of the increase, while the tax is half of the increase, the other half is assessment. And while SDAT does not do a very good job of that assessing, there is also natural increase and pressure on our housing stock. It also needs to be said that when we receive emails and correspondence from people asking why the county has increased their taxes over the last number of years, it is not the county that has increased their taxes. It is the assessed value of their property that has increased. And one must ask why the assessed values continue to increase, and there are two main reasons. One, Montgomery County remains a desirable place to live. People want to keep moving here, and they are. And that is putting pressure on our housing stock. And we're in the middle of spring. There's a lot more for sale signs that are out and about, and those houses are going really quickly, increasing the sale value and increasing the property values of surrounding homes, which gets to the second component of the assessed values. We're not building enough housing, and so all the pressure is on the homes that are for sale. So one way for there to be less of an increase year over year is by releasing that pressure and having more housing that people, young families can buy, seniors can move into, more food for thought for folks. But I want to get back to the central premise of this budget and the 6.1% tax increase that's proposed by the county executive. Our community is hurting. Our community is fearful. The nation is in chaos. This is not the right move at this time. We should not be adding to the economic anxiety that thousands of our neighbors are facing. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Sidney Katz.
Thank you, Madam President. And I want to thank the county staff and county executives team central staff and county executives team for your hard work on this budget. It's not an easy one. I've said many times, and I've been elected for a couple weeks, I've said many times, and many elected officials start out every conversation and say, let me tell you, this is the worst budget I've ever seen. I've said it many times. And I really thought at that time that was the worst budget I had ever seen. This one I could pass a lie detector test. This one is absolutely, and it'd be my last budget, but this is the worst budget I've seen. And it's bad in a lot of ways. It comes at us from a lot of different concerns. And my colleagues have already pointed out a couple times, many times, that we have people who don't have the disposable income that they used to have. I mean, everybody says, you know, and I've heard it over the years, that Montgomery County is paved with those golden streets. Well, it's not. And we have as much poverty, and probably we have more poverty in Montgomery County than any other county certainly in Maryland. But we have to take care of everything. Our job, and we can blame Donald Trump, and Donald Trump deserves a lot of the blame. I'm not saying he wants to put his name on everything except the problem. But I believe that what we have to do is take care of our problems. We have to make certain that regardless of who caused them, we have to solve them. I think that I'm very concerned about the reserves. I mean, you know, the 10%, well, as far as I'm concerned, the 10% is not a reserve. The 10% is something you cannot touch, as far as I'm concerned. It's a savings that just stays. It stays there for, and I believe that we need to make certain that our negotiated wages, that we're being, that our employees who work very, very hard and make certain that the public of Montgomery County is getting the services they need and deserve. That we need to be competitive with other jurisdictions. We need to make certain that our and I always call them your competition, who decides on what they're going to pay. So therefore, we need to keep our rate up as well. But we need to make certain that we keep that and that we give the resources to those employees who are doing the hard work. I think that we need to make certain, everybody's so proud of the fact that we have a AAA bond rating. Well, you start messing with a budget and you're not going to have a AAA bond rating. And then the debt becomes higher, and that is another huge issue. You know, debt is a killer. I mean, anybody that doesn't believe it, if they don't pay if you have credit cards and pay just the minimum, see how long your economy can last for you personally. This is a huge concern. And the whole idea for the 6.3 increase in the tax rate, do we know how much we actually get in dollars, or I guess dollars is what I always like to know about. Do we know how much we actually get in additional dollars from the assessments that, even if we didn't change the tax rate, how much more money we're getting in our coffers?
Yeah, so we can calculate that, but unfortunately, similar to Mr. Friedson's or Councilmember Friedson's question, I want to double check the numbers. I know that it's 164.6 million is the increase from the 6.3 cents. And so it's about half of that, but let me just double check those numbers for you.
Well, and I appreciate you double checking, because that's what we need. We need real answers for a real problem. But bottom line, as far as I'm concerned, you know, I've always heard the expression, you can't get blood from a turnip. Well, we're trying to squeeze. People say a tax rate. Well, a tax rate comes from the people who are here. This is money that we are that is being paid, and government needs money to function. I'm not somebody that believes you don't, but this is money that someone has to take from what they're doing now to increase so that we can have a higher rate of return for our taxes. That is a huge problem. And as far as I'm concerned, we need to figure out the basics going back. And I'll try to end this now. But the basis that going back to figure out how much we need for our negotiated wage increases, and start from there, and then figure out what else we have. But we have got to be concerned. And the whole idea of kicking this can down the road for another year just doesn't work. We have got to figure it out this year to see how in the world we can straighten this mess out, because this is a mess. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilmember Will Jawando.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the presentation from our staff and for OMB and Finance for being here and comments of colleagues. We are in a unprecedented time. I think budgets always are tough, but I cannot recall a budget that I've worked on or that has been proposed probably in the county's history where you had all this happening at once, where you had the federal government attacking its own residents, firing employees, hurting our tax base, putting fear in people's hearts, raising prices through horrible foreign policy. And then we have the impacts of this big, ugly bill, that the worst of which will hit later this year in this budget that we're considering now, where immediately after the election later this year, thousands of residents will lose Medicaid and health care right away because of the immigration changes. And then another 20,000 plus will be caught in this horrible recertification and be at risk of losing their health care. At the same time, I've had meetings, as I'm sure my colleagues have had, with our Primary Care Coalition and other members who are saying what the county executive has proposed, the 2.5% increase, is woefully inadequate to meet the need of today, not the need of December, when those 25,000 plus people may be kicked off. I think we have to sit with the unprecedented nature of that in this moment. And I've said this before, that money is going to give tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires, some of whom live in Montgomery County, the largest jurisdiction that has the largest number of those people. That's happening all right here. And that's why since the day I've gotten on this council, I've pushed for progressive taxation. We got a little bit of authority last year, thanks to Julie Blockvich-Carr and others. But we're not left with great choices, because who wants to raise taxes on people who are already struggling? Nobody. But we have to take care of people. If I have a loaf of bread and someone next to me is starving, I'm going to break that bread in half and give them that piece. And that's the situation we're unfortunately in, where we have to step up for our residents. And we have to do it in a smart way. We have to do it in a way that's as fair as possible, given the constraints. And we're also going to have to look at potential reductions. We're going to have to do all of those things. But to say that we can't step up or won't step up, I think is not something I'm willing to do. I want to talk about this idea. I want to ask a question about cuts versus inflationary costs. It's been stated a couple times up here by a few of my colleagues that there are no cuts being proposed. If we have to meet the numbers that you said, for example, and I appreciate those examples, the 450, the three illustrative examples of what would need to be reduced to meet the budget. Costs are up everywhere. So to flat fund a budget, and I'll ask OMB to answer this question. In my view, and if you can agree with this or you can provide any further context, if you don't increase a budget of an agency that's providing services when everything that agency does costs more money, in my book, that's a cut. I don't know how it's just like if you go to buy food at the store and it costs 3 times as much as it did last year and you have no more money, your wages, you can't buy the food. An HVAC costs 3 times the amount it costs 10 years ago, right? That's just a fact, in the schools context, for example. So could you just speak to how you grappled with and how you see this concept of a reduction or a cut versus what you need to increase to make sure that you can meet same service or increased service, and how that reflected in this budget?
There are a lot of examples of that in this budget. Just for instance, leased property, utility costs that go along with those leased properties, contracts for goods and supplies, even chemicals to operate our pools. Those are what we would call maintenance level items, which are things that need to occur in order to have the same level of service you had in the previous year. There is quite a bit of that in this budget, and from what we've seen in our analysis is that this is it's something that's unavoidable. And if a department is not able to maintain those costs as they increase, they would be in a situation where they'd have to prioritize what they're able to do, and some things may fall off of that list. It's just impossible to get around the appropriation that you have if it's insufficient to begin with to cover the costs to deliver everyday services.
Meaning a reduction of service of some level, whether it's people or pool equipment, or So I just think we need to be honest about that. And that doesn't mean we don't need to do that. I think we're going to have to look at those things, but we need to understand that that's what's happening. The other question I wanted to ask for our staff, or either can chime in, just the number of, we're in a people business. I think you said, Mr. Howard, or that in the schools context is nearly 90% are people is what it funds. With the negotiated agreements, what is that number, again, to meet the negotiated agreements on both MCPS side and on the schools and on the county government side?
So for the county government,
and how does that, what does that do to the gap there? What's that gap?
So for county government, the total dollar amount for the pay adjustments is $47.4 million in tax supported dollars, and MCPS is about $161 million in tax supported. So that's the value of all the different components, give and take, and all the different pieces.
So 161 plus 47.
Correct. So it's a little over 200 million.
Got it.
Now there are some, the agency's budgets don't. Those are different components of the budgets that increase it. Then there's some decreases as well. For example, we always talk about lapse. When you talk about the agency's total personnel cost, the lapse dollars from turnover and vacancies kind of get subtracted from that. So when we review total personnel costs for all the agencies, you'll see different percentage increases. But those are all the different variables, the puts and takes, go into the personnel costs overall.
And so
personnel costs are going up by about 5% in MCPS and about 3.7% in county government.
Right, and that accounts for how much of the increase we're seeing in this budget?
I'll have to get back to you. Okay. I don't want to say a
you see what
wrong
I'm
number,
saying?
but yes,
I'd like to know.
It is a big component of it. Okay. I think the compensation component is the largest component of the increases across the agencies.
Right, and so that would be that's what you pay the people to do the job. Then the other thing I just was talking about is how much it costs to do the job, to provide this health care, to provide the pool, to provide the recs, whatever it is. And then you have those costs together, and that's what we're grappling with. Do you pay the people? Do you provide same level of service when there's enormous need that is going to get worse? That's a tough question. Last thing I'll say is the question of a reserve. We voted on, every year we grapple with this. What's the appropriate use of reserves? I think we've appropriately said that we need to be above 10%, absolutely. But a reserve is is something you use in an emergency. I think what we're in right now qualifies as an emergency. Now, you hope that the emergency ends. I hope the election in November does better and we get some control at the federal level to mitigate some of this. But we're in an emergency. Let's be clear that, this is an emergency. So the question is, what do we do in this emergency? And I think we have to do what we can. So thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Next, Councilmember Shebra Evans.
Sure. So, I'm new. No, I thought I would start off with that. No, seriously, no. No, I just want to start off with that just to kind of lighten it up just a little bit. What I am very much aware of is that every decision that we make on this council impacts residents in real ways, and every resident will experience our decision in different ways. I'm not here to ask any questions. My colleagues have asked quite a few questions. They've made comments that resonate with me, but I do know that the decision is here now at the council. And what I want the 1 million viewers to know is that I plan to be thoughtful. I feel a huge sense of responsibility. When I sat on that side of the dais on December the 2nd, I said that I wanted to bring people along. I wanted to build trust, and I wanted people to know what our decisions were going to be every step of the way. I do continue to advise people to come to the hearings, to continue to send emails. They've been really helpful to me. I've had a lot of visits with students, with nonprofit leaders, with business owners, and it's all very helpful. It helps me to shape the decisions that I'm going to make. It helps inform me. I'm holding listening sessions across the county to really hear from our residents what their real experience, what their real lived experiences are here in Montgomery County. I know from an education viewpoint, but being on the council, there are more things to think about. And this is tough. I've had people ask me this week, last week, and the week before. Every time they see me, they ask me, am I enjoying myself? How tough is this job? And I will say, I am enjoying myself. This job is tough, but I didn't expect anything less. What I can say is I appreciate my colleagues on this council. Everyone has a different way of approaching the work, but at the end of the day, what I do know is that they all care about the residents. So we do have some really tough decisions to make. I think I just more so wanted people to know my thought process in all of this. And I just want to say to Mr. Howard, Mr. Smith, and all the other staff working, thank you. This was a really, really great report. As a new council member, this was very helpful to me. But what I do know is that you all have been working very diligently since March the 13th, trying to make sure that we're taking a really deep dive into this budget. I'm doing my own work. I'm doing my own reading. I'm going back and looking at old meetings to kind of get an idea of where we were at, because I wasn't paying that close of attention. And so I do appreciate what all goes into this work. And I appreciate being here and having staff that can help me take a deep dive. So I didn't want to, I don't have any questions of OMB. I do feel like at this point, this is our job to do. And I hope that the community is paying attention, that they are reading, and that they do know that there are some very tough decisions that have to be made. But hopefully you've heard from everyone that people are being real thoughtful and really taking a deep dive and wanting to ensure that we're not going to further exacerbate what some of our residents are going through. Definitely not intentionally. So I'll just leave that there and just say again, thank you for this work that you all have done to make it a little bit easier to quickly take a look and make decisions going forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Krista Mink.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to council staff and OMB for your work here. Just wanted to emphasize a couple of points. The failures to increase funding to maintain levels of same services. Obviously, that has a human cost that I think we all see in our inboxes. And as we talk to community members and ourselves and our neighbors, all of those things we're seeing. In many cases, it also creates, just from a fiscal perspective, it creates more expense for the county down the line as well. We obviously don't have the funding to take care of all of the needs in advance. But that's the balance that we're looking to maintain, and areas where investment on the front end have pay themselves back at a quick rate, sometimes within the same fiscal year, to not make those investments cost us economically as well. So as an example, funding for which we has faced over the last couple of years as we looked at supplementals. Funding for rental assistance, funding to keep people housed, the SHARP program, funding to quickly rehouse folks who are in shelter, who are in emergency shelter, who are being hoteled, et cetera. We know that it's an investment, but it's cheaper than hoteling families who end up homeless because they didn't have access to support to help them stay housed or to quickly be rehoused. And so we have moved supplementals to address that, because again, it is not only less traumatic for our community members and for families to be able to to either stay housed or move quickly into their new housing, but that is much cheaper for us than paying for hotels to keep those families and children off the streets, which is a commitment that we have made in Montgomery County. And so recognizing that, we have moved supplementals, and I will note that there were, in some of these cases, it was predictable that there was going to be a gap, and we were going to end up in a situation where we were either going to need more money for emergency shelter, for hoteling, or we were going to need more money for the SHARP program, for example. And it will be better to have that in the budget rather than having to deal with a supplemental that we know is coming, and that if we don't move that supplemental, it will be more expensive for the county. Again, within the same fiscal year, it would be more expensive for the county. So I think those are some of the questions that we're going to need to grapple with during these budget discussions. What is the return on these investments, and also what is the cost of not making those investments within the same fiscal year, in the next fiscal year, and kind of our immediate future, which is looking a little bit into the out years. There's a lot of unpredictability, but some of these costs can be predicted as well. It would be really helpful for there to be a way in the packets to get clarity from the executive branch which of the increases that are proposed are to maintain the same level of services, and we would need to make sure that there's agreement of what exactly I think is meant by maintenance of same services, which I think is some of the difficulty in the conversation that we're having now potentially. So what are the, if we could have that be made really, really clear, not just for us, but the clear that we can make it for residents. There's a great benefit to that as well. So what are the, obviously, like new programs, that's not maintenance of same services, but there's a lot more gray area besides that as well. So whatever can be done to help. I see, it looks like you might be reaching for your button.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to. I wanted to let you finish, of course. But we have asked staff to do exactly that in consultation with the departments and the agencies, and for all the different line items to be as clear as we can be on what it exactly would be going for, what's the impact of doing it, what's the impact of not doing it. As you said, some of it is a gray area of what's maintenance versus what's an increase, and there can be some debate and discussion upon that. But our goal is to provide all that information so that you all have what you need to make those decisions. With the understanding that there may be some variability across departments and things like that. We will rely on the executive branch to provide us a lot of that information, but we'll do the best that we can to provide that for all the different line items.
I appreciate that. And again, I think that definition of what means, as you are agreeing with here, that the definition of what maintaining same level of services means is going to be really important to, if there's going to be variation across departments, which realistically, as to your point, there is, just making sure that that's really clearly spelled out what is being meant, what's being intended here. There's more services that are being sought by our residents, and this and that category. Just the more detail that we can include there, the more responsibly we can have these conversations and make decisions around it. And then noting also that progressivity in taxation is so important. Wherever we can possibly be fair and equitable. I know that's something that we've all agreed on here, and we need to look at how we can best do that, especially as Councilmember Jawando noted. The president has made taken regressive actions that we are feeling down here at the local level. The tax breaks that he has granted to folks on the wrong end of the income spectrum, and the results that are hitting our residents who most need support. We have to figure out some way to try to deal with that, or there is going to be a great human cost and also fiscal economic impact of us not addressing that this year as well. Those are investments that are worth making to the very best of our abilities, and I'm sure that that's the conversation that we're all going to be having. So thank you all.
Thank you for all your comments today. I look forward to the committee work sessions with lots of details as requested right after the public hearings, which start today. Thank you so much for coming, and we're going to move on with our agenda. Next for consideration is the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Moved by Council Vice President Balcom, second by Council Member Lori Ann Sales. Those in favor, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. The council will be in recess until noon, at which time we will meet with the Montgomery County Retired Employees Association on the 4th floor. Then we'll be back here at 1 p.m. Thank you.